Look at this.
What's that? Oh, man. And look at that sticker, too.
I know.
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in again to Real Talk by Our Stories, Your Legacy. And we're back again with another fire round episode. Again, for those who've been following along or just jumping in for the first time, our fire round episode is just any hot or trending topic that just came to our mind, or something we discovered, or something we found and just wanted to talk about, and get that message across between our group of friends. And so in today's episode, we came across a Twitter thread. Twitter has just been one of my favorite apps that I rarely do any my-sided interactions. Is mostly one-sided interaction where I follow a lot of funny people, some comedians, we talked about this in previous episodes about our favorite apps, where Twitter just happens to be, you tend to get more viral things happening before it even gets viral. You know what I mean? And so it's just been one of my favorite apps for news, for whatever is trending, and just getting a lot of information from there. I didn't go too into depth in this one, but I came across a Twitter thread where it was just a bunch of random things. And in that thread, I caught a comment where someone was talking about how they were doing acts of kindness, going out, whether it was for an experiment or just trying to change up their worldview or just their habits, right? And so in today's episode, it's talking about doing random acts of kindness, and what they found from doing those random acts of kindness in today's day and age. Maybe it's just because of how we are, or just this sort of sense of insecurity, or just not knowing how to take things anymore. She found out that it seems like a lot of people don't know how to take a compliment anymore. So we're going to kind of, today's episode, we're going to kind of deep dive, not really deep dive, we're going to have a fun, lighthearted conversation about our personal experience when it comes to doing random act of kindness, or just kindness in general with our friends, our family, and giving out compliments. And so in this episode, we're going to explore just a simple question. What's easier to accept, a compliment or criticism? And then vice versa, from our personal perspective, what's easier to give out, a compliment or criticism? So as always, before we begin, we're going to do a quick check-in around the rooms, check-in of the pulse around the room or around the Zoom room, and see who is on today's episode for those who are not watching and who are those listening. Of course, you got me, and it's just myself, and Tyler today, my brother over there. How's it going, man? How's your day going?
Going well. It's cooled off a lot today. From this little mini heat wave that we had over the weekend and whatnot. So yeah. I mean, right now, 63 out? It hasn't been 60s in
I love it.
House, so
right.
But no, I mean it's good. It's been working on a lot of stuff as far as like work related, and this is busy. I stared at Excel spreadsheets for probably 6.5 of the 8 hours I worked today. So,
right.
It gets to a point where your eyes start going cross-eyed and you got to get up and do something else. And yeah. So, I mean, just a lot of work at work as we start to get pick back up a little bit, but then just working on some stuff on the side. So keeping busy for sure as things get busier and start picking up. And, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm doing well. Health-wise, I'm doing well as well. I know the Delta variant's kind of going crazy right now with, across the country, and we're seeing all these hospitalizations and all that stuff. But I am in good health, so I have nothing to complain about. Doing well.
Awesome, man. Let's jump right in. So just like we were mentioning earlier in our introduction, this is pretty straightforward, right? This is kind of like our day-to-day life. Maybe we might not always do random acts of kindness, but we try our best to be kind to others, right? And so Tyler, I'm gonna start with you, and then I'll chime in too. When I hear a spot, but I'm gonna start with you. What's easier to accept, whether it's from your personal experience or from what you see generally, right? What's easier to accept, a compliment or criticism?
Yeah, I think honestly, it depends on how it's being delivered. I think that plays a huge role because it kind of sets the tone in which you're going to receive said compliment or criticism, really. If it's constructive criticism to where it's like, hey, we should probably talk about this and da 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 da, then yeah, you're coming at it like, okay, they have an understanding. They're not just like bashing me and throwing this right at my face and just being like, hey, buddy, you suck kind of thing, like it's a very like, it comes from a caring place, that tone, a very calm and smooth tone, just giving me feedback, essentially. I know a lot of people maybe don't take feedback or criticism as well as some of us do. So, again, I think it just depends on where you come from. If it's just kind of out of the blue, or you like, like some people might criticize without really realize they're criticizing, you know what I'm saying? So like, it's one of those situations where like, you might do something for somebody, and don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of doing this every now and then too. Whereas like someone might do something, their way, and then, things get done, but then you might pipe in with a comment of like, yeah, maybe, what I would have done? I would have done that. Maybe next time, maybe consider doing that. It might have been more efficient or more quick or whatever. It's just, something like that. If you say that, but obviously it's nonchalant, you don't really think about it, but that person could take that as like wow, that's kind of disrespectful. You just kind of came into my own house or did all this or did all that. Or maybe I put my 110% in trying to do this thing. Like, oh, I cooked dinner. And the first thing you do is say, man, this thing is so bland, like da 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 da, like not even like being appreciative that like, that I cooked dinner. You just commented on how bland it was, obviously example, I'm a pretty decent cook. I know my stuff, but as an example, just saying. So that stuff happens. I've seen it. I know it happens. But sometimes those people just don't even know that they're really doing it. They're just like, that's kind of like where their mind goes to, but it could be disrespectful, could be a little hurtful. So I think that's why some people also maybe have a harder time taking criticism, because it's just like, oh man, maybe I have to deal with that at work or in the outside world, and then I come home and then I still get bashed on, you know what I'm saying? So, but as far as like compliments go, I think people are so humble and modest these days that, it's kind of hard to take a compliment as well. It's like, no, because unless you're a person who just really enjoys the spotlight and really being that center of attention, that focal point of the attention in the room, sometimes it's just hard to take a compliment too, like I know for one, I can give compliments with the best of them, obviously, just I am not afraid, like at work or even at home, to just compliment something. But again, I am also guilty of just randomly saying like, I would have done, So I'm in both situations. I'm guilty of both. But I'm not shy to compliment people at work and like my coworkers or my, my employees that work with me and kind of for me and everything. And obviously constructive criticism is the best way to go, as far as like, don't attack the person, give it to them so that they can learn. It's a learning opportunity for them. But, it's also one of those things like, again, when I receive a compliment, I think I have learned over the years to just accept it and just be like, oh, you don't have to say that, or oh, thanks, I appreciate it. Whereas, like, before, I was definitely amongst the people that uh, would definitely get complimented and just like shy away almost, like, can you not, like, I'm not here fishing for compliments or whatever. I just, don't make me the center of attention. I don't want all of this on me. So I don't know. I feel like where I'm at now compared to where I was, I would say that I still take a little bit of criticism better than a compliment. Usually the two are tied together in certain situations where, like, like, I'll take criticism and then I'll get a compliment right away. Um, but you never know how it's gonna play out. But typically, I'll take some criticism better than a compliment most times. But again, I think it just depends on how you deliver it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that, man. I mean, you kind of nailed it on the head. It's all about perception, right? It's all about just how everything comes off, like how you the tone of your voice, or how all that comes off. Because maybe you're in the heat of a really tough meeting, and you have to give feedback, and you just happen to rail one off at a coworker, about how they could do better at such and such, but you didn't really mean to come off as an asshole. It was just one of those things where it was just heat of the moment, but you meant, good intentions. But, to add on to everything you already said, not to repeat it, but I feel like, as humans, we, especially me, sometimes I'll say things with good intentions that can come off wrong. And I have to kind of slow down and be like, you know what? I apologize for that. So I think another big thing is learning how to communicate, openly and honestly. Um, because at the end of the day, I feel like when it comes to kindness, and whether and in the form of kindness of us giving, whether it's a compliment or a criticism, most times it's all out of goodwill. And but the delivery has to be um, the delivery has to come off in two-way street as well. Like, when you're gonna say something, you have to be mindful of how the other side, the other party is going to accept it as well. And so um, a lot of people can argue and say, hey, that's dumb. You should always speak your mind. Don't because if you mean goodwill, they should know that, and all that stuff, blah blah blah. It depends on the situation, right? It's like I like to think that as folks who, like, myself and Tyler, who we like to, when asked for it, we like to give our advice as best as we can. Sometimes it's better to listen and accept more rather than give, and so if someone's asking for advice, maybe we're like, maybe our advice is that let's hear you talk about it. Let's hear you talk it through. So instead of giving direct uh, like compliments or criticism, maybe you spin it off into a conversation where the other party who are looking for that type of receivement, is that even a word, compliment or criticism, talk it through themselves, and then you guys kind of come up with a solution together. Who knows? It's always, there's different ways to do it. From our opinion, it's like, it's just tread lightly, speak the way that you would like to be received. But there's so many ways. That's the beauty of conversations, right? And also I think that another beauty of conversations, sometimes you do have to be the asshole during certain situations. Sometimes you have to say things in a mean way just to get it on the table, even if it's good intentions. But sometimes you just have to get it on the table, no matter how bad it is. And so it just depends on the situation. The number one thing, though, just like how we end all our conversations, it's all about that dialogue, and so just, it's one of those things, keeping the dialogue going. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I think that you definitely have to be an asshole sometimes.
Right.
Just to get the point across. So
Right.
I mean, yeah, I understand that like feelings like are going to be involved in both of them, but sometimes that's, you got to go hard knocks on them, kind of.
Right. Right.
Get it out there. Otherwise, sometimes you may not get it out there at all.
Right. No, true. Any before we move on to the final question, any final thoughts on what's easier to accept, a compliment or criticism, from your personal perspective? What would you what would you say from your perspective, if you had to choose one to have more of? What would you have?
Yeah, no, I think I answered it earlier, but I would say criticism as well. I like criticism because it gives me an opportunity to continue to learn and continue to grow. I don't mind compliments,
Right.
but I don't necessarily like getting showered with compliments. It's the same thing with, once you hit a certain age, you don't want to be the center of attention at a birthday party. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, even as a kid, you're just like, why are people singing? I just want to open presents. Actually, I don't know why these people are here, kind of thing for parties and stuff. So, yeah, it's the same situation. I don't necessarily love to get showered with singing and gifts just thrown at me all over the place on a birthday. It's kind of the same thing goes with compliments. So I feel like I learn more from obviously criticism than I do compliments.
Yeah, I second that. My final thought on this first question: what's easier to accept, compliment or criticism? I mean, obviously, as the question is written, what's easier to accept? Obviously, a compliment. That's easier to just, yes, give it to me, right? But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I feel like I don't have room for growth if it's just constant compliments. I want someone to just tell me, yeah, man, you're doing that wrong, and I'm like, you know what? Then that's something for me, for some room to grow. All right. Thanks for that. Now, to segue into the final question of the night, let's flip it on its head. So for you, Tyler, what's easier to give, a compliment or criticism?
I think which one's harder to give? Is that what you said?
Yeah, or what's easier to give? But
no. I was just trying to determine the question again, but
yeah,
I would say the harder one to give. I think it's because it also depends on the background, how you were raised, and all that stuff. I think coming from speaking to an Asian background, for instance, we didn't get praised much. You know what I'm saying? It was a very quiet praise. So like from that perspective, how you grow up, it's like you want to try to break the mold in that regard, because it's like, there were so many times where it's like, I don't know if my parents are actually proud of me for what I'm doing, because I don't get complimented enough from them. But I don't like when other people compliment me a lot, because I don't want to be the center of attention. So it's kind of a mix of different things, So I think with growing up in that kind of environment as well makes it also hard. And I obviously can't speak for all Asians, it's very generally speaking. But I would say a lot of Asian parents, they are proud of their kids, but I think they're always looking for more. They want, there's an expectation there that you have to hold yourself to a high standard. So, if say you got a B or something, it's like, oh, only a B? Why not an A? I'm like, dang, that was a super hard class. Like, what the heck, kind of thing, So I think growing up like that, you kind of obviously want to break the mold. But I would definitely say it's harder for me I don't know. I think that one's hard. I think it just depends on the situation, because I think if you don't give compliments, because they sometimes are hard to give, because like you think you're giving compliments, but it's not necessarily compliments. You don't go out of your way to give compliments all the time. it almost makes people think that you don't care about them if you don't compliment them. But it almost seems like it's being pushed upon them if you know, make it a point to compliment them every day or something, depending on what it is, of course. For, the flip side of the coin, where it's criticism, I feel like that's also kind of nerve-wracking to give criticism to someone. Like, how are they going to take it? Are they going to take it as like, wow, that was disrespectful? I didn't like that. Why did you give me criticism there, kind of thing? And like I said earlier, to the first point, was that a lot of people don't really realize they're giving criticism, and it comes off as, like they just are not appreciating you. But at the same time, if you're not giving compliments, it makes it look doubly bad, because they're not appreciating you because you're only criticizing them and you don't give them compliments. So it's a double-edged sword, I think, when you get to that point. But I digress into deeper parts of the conversation, where it's background, culture, and all that stuff too. Some people get showered with compliments and praise growing up, and a lot of people don't. So they feel like they're almost like, they failed a little bit, kind of thing. So like, there's nothing that we can do that would make them proud, even though inside they're extremely proud. They just don't know how to show how proud, or that love and that kind of stuff. So,
right.
I would say, generally speaking, though, I would say, for me personally, I think it would be easier for me to give criticism. I like to praise people, and I like to give compliments when I can. But I think that just in the world we live in today, I feel like, I don't know if it just puts me in a mood, but I feel like criticism is way easier to give than a compliment at times,
Yeah, that's an interesting point. For me, I feel like it's, and this is to each their own. I feel like it's easier to give a compliment, because you give a compliment, you're on your way, right? It's sometimes, I mean, with that said, a compliment can also be like a little white lie, right? It's like, yeah, that shirt looks good on you. Let's just, even though, a little white lie, it's their favorite shirt, but you're just gonna be like, I don't feel like having this conversation, and I know that it's not going to harm you in any way. Yeah, sure, that shirt looks good on you. So it all depends. But that's my answer to it. Is like, I think for me, it's easier to give a compliment, because sometimes criticism might take a little more effort, even though, just like from our first question, criticism is the ultimate, act of kindness and conversation, because it's like it helps everyone grow, especially if it's perceived correctly, especially if it's given the right way. For criticism, though, I feel like you have to preface the situation, depending on what it is. If it's a passion project someone's working on, sometimes you got to pull them aside. Maybe you got to figure out a strategy to how to properly have them perceive it correctly. So maybe you do a compliment sandwich, right? Compliment, criticism, compliment, whatever. But it's like, sometimes you got to figure out what is the proper way to present this criticism, this constructive feedback, right? And so sometimes you got to set the mood. You gotta be like, okay, hey, this is not an intervention, but hey, can we go have a quick lunch or sit down here? I want to talk to you about your thing, some good, some bad, setting the tone for it. Again, it's all part of communicating openly and honestly. You got to have that dialogue. And so, whatever, to make sure you're all on the same page before you deliver it is probably ultimate. We're not pros at it by any means, but it's just from my experience, that's how I feel is best when I need to deliver tough news like criticism, right? But yeah, that's my last take on it. If I had to answer this question, what's easier to give, a compliment or criticism? I feel like I'm going to choose the lazy answer in this one and say a compliment is easier to give. Um, and that's what I would choose most of the time, rather than, do the hard work. But that doesn't mean that I won't do the hard work if someone does need that criticism. But for the sake of this question, I'm going to take a compliment 60% of the time. Or I'm going to give a compliment 60%, 65, 70% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I think honestly, again, it just goes back to how it's delivered, honestly. Because I feel like, I would agree that giving compliments are easy, but then it's like, on the other side, like if that person's like me, I'm like, I don't want to be complimented. What the heck? Are they lying? Do I lie back to them? Do I just say,
Right.
thanks? Like kind of that awkward, fair weather type of conversation.
Right.
To tying into last week a little bit, but yeah, it's just one of those things. I think it really just depends on the person, because I feel like, yeah, sure, compliments are easy to give, but then how they're received could be like, I don't know if that person has really complimented me in a week, so I don't know if what does he want? Does
Right.
he need something? Is he trying to get on my good side? So it's all a very mind. It's a big mind game. It's a game within a game within a game. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's just interesting takes for sure. I think to your point, why I think it's easier to give criticism is because you have an opportunity to really think about what you're going to say.
Yeah.
It's almost one of those things, like sometimes when you just throw out compliments, I think people don't know how to take them, but also
Right.
down to, it's the same situation of like, when you're walking past someone and you say, hey, how are you? Like, you don't actually expect an answer back. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's kind of our way of just like, hey, what's up? you know,
Right.
like, hey, how are you? And people are like, good, how are you? And you're like, did not expect that. I'm good. As you're like 10 feet past them already.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things too, man. Yeah. It's like I said, it's down to perception. And again, we're talking about acts of kindness when it relates to conversation, right? So there's other acts of kindness. There's, acts of kindness without verbal communication, right? But for today's episode, it's just the sake of conversation. And it usually falls in two types. It's um, in most conversations, you're either giving a compliment or you're giving criticism, right? And so I feel like, it depends on the receiving end, and your personal preference. Like for me, I prefer to accept criticism, but I prefer to give compliments, whatever that means, that's for a deeper dive later on. Any final thoughts, Tyler, on this topic?
um, I would say just be yourself, do what's comfortable for you. If you're taking this question and really thinking about why is it easier to give a give a compliment or receive a criticism kind of thing, like why is that? Do whatever's comfortable for you, because that's how it is. If you start thinking about some of the things that were said in this episode, where like you start to notice things like, huh, my family didn't compliment me that much, why, kind of thing. It might just bring up some feelings, and maybe bad ones. We apologize. That wasn't the intention. We were just having a conversation, obviously. That's some of our experience, coming from a background too. So, if it makes you kind of analyze your life and your situations, and maybe why you're bitter toward the world right now. Who knows? Maybe just think on it, sit on it, and reflect. It's really what it comes down to. But at the end of the day, just do what's comfortable for you. But take that extra second to really kind of think about it too. Think about what you say before you say it. whether it's a compliment or criticism, think about it. I know people say it all the time, think before you speak, but to the point of like, oh man, this could use some salt. Like, yeah, it's a very small, insignificant comment to you, maybe, just because like maybe that's your way of saying, can you pass the salt? But the way you word it could be hurtful for the person who might have cooked the food. And maybe you haven't complimented them in a few days. So, the appreciation factor is there. So take that extra second before you might have some scathing comment that you don't think is scathing, but whatever.
Yeah, no, thanks for the final thoughts on that. And yeah, we're going to wrap it up here. And as always, following along, Tyler's ended the conversation well. Like we said, most importantly, always keep the dialogue going, start that mental exercise with you, keep the conversation going, apply it to your life, see how it applies to your friends and family's life. And that's how we learn and grow, right? And we're going to wrap it up here. We're going to keep working on this. We're going to keep trying to improve every single day, every single week. So we appreciate the listen. We appreciate the feedback. And we will be right here again next week. So have a good night. This is Our Stories, Your Legacy, with another episode from Real Talk. And we will catch you again next week. Have a good night.
Later.